It was a freezing night when an old man heard scratching at his cabin door. When he opened it, a shivering German shepherd stood there, ribs visible, eyes full of fear, with two tiny puppies hiding behind her. Most people would have turned them away, but he didn't. He stepped aside, letting the mother and her babies in. What happened next would shock everyone in town. Because this dog didn't just need saving. She had come carrying a secret that would change his life forever. Stay till the end, because what this man discovered inside his humble cabin will leave you speechless. Before we start, make sure to hit like, share, and subscribe. And really, I'm curious, where are you watching from? Drop your country name in the comments. I love seeing how far our stories travel. The wind howled through the pine forest like a living creature, its icy breath sweeping across the snow-covered mountains. Inside a small wooden cabin at the edge of the woods, an old man named Harold sat beside a flickering fireplace, his hands wrapped around a chipped mug of tea that had long gone cold. The cabin creaked with every gust, as if groaning from the weight of another long winter. Harold had lived alone for years, his only companions the echo of the past and the soft ticking of the clock on the mantel. Outside, the world was silent, buried under thick white snow. He stared out the frosted window, watching as the storm grew fiercer. The sky had turned into a swirling blur of gray and white, swallowing the forest whole. Harold sighed and adjusted the worn blanket on his shoulders. Nights like this reminded him of everything he had lost. His wife, gone too soon, and the family that had drifted away over the years. Sometimes the silence was comforting. Other times it pressed against his chest like the cold air seeping through the cracks in the wood. As the wind screamed louder, Harold thought about turning in early. He set down his mug and poked the fire, the orange flames dancing weakly in response. That's when he heard it, faint at first, almost lost in the storm. A sound that didn't belong to the forest, a soft, desperate scratching at the door. He froze, listening again. There it was, a whine followed by another weak scratch. For a moment he wondered if it was just the wind playing tricks on him. But then came a low, sorrowful whimper that made his heart ache. Harold hesitated, his hand hovering over the doorknob. No one ever came out this far, especially not in weather like this. Whoever or whatever was out there was fighting to survive. He took a deep breath and reached for the door, unaware that the moment he opened it, his quiet, lonely life was about to change forever. The door creaked open, and a blast of freezing wind swept into the cabin, carrying with it a swirl of snow. Harold squinted through the blizzard, his eyes adjusting to the dim glow spilling from the fireplace behind him. At first he saw nothing, just the endless curtain of white. But then a faint movement caught his attention, a shadow trembling. Stepping closer, Harold gasped. There, half buried in the snow, stood a German shepherd, thin as a ghost, her fur matted with ice and frost. She stared at him with wide, pleading eyes, her ribs visible beneath her coat. Behind her, two tiny puppies huddled together, their small bodies shaking violently from the cold. The mother's legs wobbled, but she stood firm, shielding them with her body. "Oh, dear Lord," Harold whispered, his heart twisting. He could see it now, desperation in the dog's eyes, exhaustion in every breath. She looked like she hadn't eaten in days. The puppies whimpered softly, pressing closer to her for warmth. For a long moment, Harold just stood there, torn between caution and compassion. He hadn't had visitors in years, much less stray animals appearing at his doorstep in the middle of a storm. But then the mother took a step forward, just one, and stopped, as if afraid he might shut the door. Her paw sank deep into the snow, trembling from weakness. The sight broke something inside Harold. He couldn't ignore them. Not tonight. Not in this storm. "All right, girl," he said softly, his voice trembling. "Come on now. It's warm inside." He stepped back and opened the door wider, letting the golden light of the cabin spill onto the snow. The mother hesitated, her eyes darting between the man and her pups. Then, with one last glance at the swirling storm behind her, she nudged her puppies forward. One by one, they stumbled into the cabin, leaving tiny wet paw prints across the wooden floor. When the mother finally stepped inside, she lowered her head and exhaled as if surrendering the weight of her struggle. Harold gently closed the door behind them, shutting out the storm. The sound of the wind faded away, replaced by the crackle of fire and the soft whimpers of new life finding shelter. He didn't know it yet, but that simple act of kindness had just opened the door to a miracle. The warmth of the cabin wrapped around them like a gentle embrace. The mother dog stood still for a moment, blinking against the sudden change in light and temperature. Her fur was damp, glistening with melted snow that pooled onto the wooden floor. The puppies whimpered softly, their tiny paws slipping as they tried to explore this new world that smelled of firewood and old memories. Harold knelt beside them, his knees cracking as he lowered himself down. "It's all right now," he murmured, reaching out a cautious hand. The mother flinched at first, her instincts sharp, her body still tense from the cold and fear. But when she saw the kindness in Harold's eyes, she let out a weary sigh and lowered her head. He gently brushed a patch of ice off her back, feeling the bones beneath her thick coat. She was nothing but skin, strength, and mother's love. Harold fetched an old towel from the rack by the stove and began to dry her fur, then wrapped the shivering puppies in another. They huddled close, pressing against the warmth of his hands. He found himself smiling, a faint, unfamiliar expression that softened the deep lines of his face. "You've been through hell, haven't you?" he whispered, his voice barely audible over the crackle of the fire. He poured a small bowl of water and set it down. The mother drank in short, desperate gulps, then gently nudged her puppies forward to let them drink. The sight stirred something deep within Harold, something he thought had long faded. Compassion, connection. He rose to his feet and looked toward the storm outside. Snow was still falling, relentless and cold. If he hadn't opened that door, they wouldn't have survived the night. As the flames danced higher, Harold added another log to the fire and glanced at the 3 figures curled beside it. "You're safe here," he whispered. "You're home now." For the first time in years, the cabin didn't feel empty. It felt alive. Morning crept slowly over the mountains, painting the snow outside in soft shades of gold and blue. Inside the cabin, the fire had burned low, its embers glowing faintly in the hearth. Harold stirred awake in his armchair, wrapped in his old blanket. For a moment, he forgot what had happened the night before, until he heard a soft whine near the fireplace. The mother dog lay curled protectively around her puppies, their tiny bodies pressed against her for warmth. One of them squeaked, pawing at her chest, and she immediately adjusted, licking it gently before settling again. Harold watched quietly, his heart swelling at the sight. She was exhausted, her body weak, yet her every breath was devoted to keeping her little ones alive. He rose slowly, his joints stiff from the cold, and moved to the kitchen. From an old tin can, he scooped out what little he had left, some broth and bits of meat, and warmed it on the stove. The smell filled the room, and soon the puppies lifted their tiny heads, sniffing curiously. But before they could move, their mother placed a paw over them, keeping them still. She waited until Harold set the bowl down, then cautiously approached, sniffing the food. Only after she had taken a few bites did she step aside and let her puppies eat. Harold smiled softly. "You take care of them first, don't you?" he said. "Even when you've got nothing left for yourself." As the day passed, the mother and her puppies dozed peacefully by the fire, the storm outside finally beginning to quiet. Harold sat nearby, whittling a piece of wood, but his gaze often drifted to them. It had been years since his home felt this warm, not just from the fire, but from something deeper. For the first time in a long while, he didn't feel alone. The silence that once haunted the cabin now felt like peace, and though he didn't yet realize it, this fragile bond forming between man and dog would soon change both their lives forever. Days passed, and the snow outside grew heavier, blanketing the world in endless white. Inside the cabin, warmth and life had returned. The puppies grew stronger, their tiny tails wagging clumsily whenever Harold entered the room. He had started calling them the little ones, though he hadn't yet named them. Their mother, however, remained cautious. She followed Harold with her eyes wherever he went, not out of fear anymore, but with quiet trust. Still, something about her wasn't right. Harold first noticed it one morning when she tried to stand. She rose carefully, putting weight on her front paws, but her back leg trembled. A sharp whimper escaped her before she settled back down, licking the injured limb. He frowned. It wasn't the first time he'd seen her do that. Every time she moved, there was a stiffness, a hesitation, as if every step hurt. "Easy there, girl," Harold murmured, kneeling beside her. He gently ran his hand along her leg, feeling the tension in her muscles. She flinched but didn't pull away. He could feel a faint bump beneath the fur, old, healed wrong perhaps. A wound from before she came here. "You've been through something rough, haven't you?" He warmed a damp cloth by the fire and pressed it gently to her leg. The dog let out a low sigh, her body relaxing under his touch. The puppies, unaware of their mother's pain, tumbled around playfully, yipping at one another. Harold couldn't help but chuckle softly, though his heart ached for her. That night, as he sat near the fire, he watched her sleeping. The firelight flickered across her fur, highlighting the faint scars near her shoulder. Old injuries that told silent stories of struggle. Harold leaned back, staring into the flames. "You didn't just survive the cold," he whispered. "You survived something far worse." Outside, the wind howled again, but inside, it was quiet, except for the sound of steady breathing, and the unspoken bond between two souls who understood what it meant to endure. It was a calm afternoon when Harold decided to clean the dogs properly for the first time. The storm had finally broken, leaving a rare beam of sunlight spilling through the window. The mother dog rested near the fireplace while her puppies slept in a pile of fur and tiny paws. Harold filled a small basin with warm water and gently called her over. "Come here, girl," he said softly. "Let's get you cleaned up a bit." She hesitated, but then slowly approached, her limp still noticeable. Harold dipped a rag into the water and began wiping the dirt and dried mud from her fur. With every careful stroke, the dog seemed to relax, her breathing slowing, her trust deepening. He hummed quietly, a tune his wife once used to sing while washing dishes. The rhythm of it filled the cabin with a strange peace. Then, as his fingers moved along her neck, he felt something hard beneath the fur, a small metallic object tangled in a knot of matted hair. He frowned. "What's this?" he murmured, carefully parting the fur. It was an old rusted collar tag, nearly hidden by grime and years of wear. The chain was half broken and the metal was icy cold against his fingertips. Harold squinted, rubbing the tag gently with a damp cloth. Slowly, faint letters began to appear beneath the rust. Not a full name, but fragments. K9. Unit, and a string of numbers engraved below. His heartbeat quickened. This wasn't an ordinary stray. He looked up at her. The German shepherd met his gaze with calm, intelligent eyes, the kind that had seen discipline, danger, and duty. "You were trained," he whispered. "You were someone's partner." The realization hit him like a wave. Somewhere out there, someone might have been searching for her, or maybe she'd been lost long enough for the world to forget. He traced the letters again, his mind racing with questions. Why had she been wandering alone in the storm? What happened to her unit? The mother dog laid her head in his lap, as if to say that the past no longer mattered. Only the safety of this moment did. But Harold couldn't shake the feeling that fate had just handed him a mystery. The discovery of the tag kept Harold awake that night. He couldn't stop thinking about the faded engraving, K9 unit. The letters echoed in his mind, stirring questions he couldn't answer. By morning, he made up his mind. The mother dog needed medical attention anyway, and maybe, just maybe, the vet could shed some light on her mysterious past. The old pickup rumbled through the snow-covered road as Harold drove toward the small town nearby. The German shepherd lay quietly on a blanket in the passenger seat, her head resting against the window, the puppies snuggled in a basket between them. Every now and then, Harold glanced over at her. "We'll get you checked out, girl," he said. "Maybe find out who you really are." The vet clinic sat at the edge of town, a modest brick building with a faded sign and a warm yellow door. As Harold stepped inside, a bell chimed overhead. The air smelled of disinfectant and hope. Dr. Lewis, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes, greeted him immediately. "What do we have here?" she asked, crouching down to meet the dog's gaze. "Oh, sweetheart. You've had a rough time, haven't you?" Harold explained everything. How he found her in the storm, how she protected her puppies, and finally the old collar tag. When he handed it to the vet, she frowned, cleaning the metal gently with a cloth. "K9 unit," she read aloud. "That's interesting. These tags are used for trained police or rescue dogs. And look, this serial number, it's standard issue." She examined the shepherd carefully, running her hands over her legs, shoulders, and ribs. "She's strong, but she's been injured before. See here? Old fracture on the hind leg. Looks like she was hurt in the line of duty." Harold's eyes widened. "You mean she used to work for the police?" Dr. Lewis nodded slowly. "Or a search and rescue team. Either way, she's not just a stray. She's a survivor. As Harold watched her gently pet the dog, he felt a strange mix of pride and sorrow. This wasn't just a lost animal. She was a hero who had once saved others, and now somehow had come to him for saving. Fate, he realized, had a way of bringing the right souls together at the right time. The next morning, Harold's phone rang unexpectedly. It was Dr. Lewis, her voice filled with urgency. "Harold, I think you'd better come down to the clinic," she said. "I found something you'll want to see." His heart raced as he bundled up and hurried out into the crisp morning air. Rex, the name he had finally given the mother dog, watching curiously from the cabin window. When Harold arrived, the vet greeted him with a serious expression and led him to her office. On her desk lay a printed document beside the cleaned collar tag. "I ran the serial number," she explained, pointing to the papers. "It's registered to a rescue unit that was active 3 years ago. The dog's name was listed as Maya. She was declared missing in action after a landslide during a mountain rescue mission." Harold's breath caught. "Missing in action?" Dr. Lewis nodded. "They thought she died saving her handler. But look, this report confirms it's her. The same identification number, the same scar pattern on her hind leg." Harold stared at the papers in disbelief, his eyes flicking between the printed report and the dog's photo. A younger, stronger version of the same animal sleeping now in his truck outside. "So she's a rescue dog?" "She saved people before?" he whispered. "She did more than that," the vet said softly. "She pulled 2 survivors out of a collapsed cabin before vanishing. Her team searched for weeks but never found her. No one knew what became of her until now." Harold leaned back, overwhelmed. He pictured her trudging through snow, protecting her puppies, finding his cabin by chance. Or maybe he thought it wasn't chance at all. Maybe she had been drawn to safety one last time, to someone who needed saving just as much as she did. As he left the clinic, the cold air stung his face, but his heart felt strangely warm. In the passenger seat, Maya lifted her head and looked at him, her deep brown eyes calm, knowing. "You're no stray," Harold said quietly, reaching over to stroke her fur. "You're a hero." And somehow, deep down, he knew she understood every word. A few days later, Harold received another call from Dr. Lewis. Her tone was gentle this time. "We've located her old handler," she said. "His name is Officer Daniel Cole. He was part of the same rescue unit. He thought Maya was gone forever." Harold's heart skipped a beat. For a moment, he didn't know what to say. He looked down at Maya, who lay peacefully beside the fire, her puppies nestled close. The idea of her leaving tugged painfully at his chest. She had brought warmth and purpose back into his life, a life that had been nothing but silence before her. "He wants to come meet her," Dr. Lewis added softly. "But the choice is yours." Harold hesitated, then agreed. It felt right to give the man who once trusted her a chance to see his partner again. 2 days later, a truck pulled up outside the cabin. A man in uniform stepped out, his eyes immediately filling with tears as he saw Maya standing in the doorway. "Maya?" he whispered, his voice breaking. The shepherd froze for a moment, her ears twitching, and then, as if a floodgate had opened, she bounded forward, limping but determined. Daniel dropped to his knees as she reached him, her tail wagging furiously, whining with joy. He wrapped his arms around her, burying his face in her fur. "I thought I lost you," he choked out. "I thought you were gone." Harold stood on the porch, his eyes misty, watching the reunion in silence. It was a moment of pure grace, the return of 2 souls who had once faced death together. But when Daniel tried to leave later that afternoon, Maya wouldn't step into his truck. She turned back toward the cabin, toward Harold and her puppies, and sat down firmly at his feet. Daniel smiled through tears. "Looks like she's already chosen her new mission," he said quietly. And in that moment, Harold understood. Love and loyalty weren't about ownership. They were about where the heart felt at home. Spring arrived quietly, melting the last traces of snow from the mountains. The once silent forest now echoed with birdsong and the soft rush of thawed streams. Harold stood on his porch, sunlight warming his weathered face, a steaming mug of coffee in his hands. Below the porch, Maya lay in the grass, watching her puppies tumble and play in the soft green field. Their coats had grown thick and healthy, their playful barks filling the air with life. It had been months since that stormy night, months since the moment he had opened his door and let hope back in. The cabin, once a lonely refuge, had become a home again. Toys littered the floor, muddy paw prints marked the hallway, and the sound of laughter, his laughter, often broke the quiet. Every morning, Maya greeted him with gentle eyes that seemed to say, "I'm still here. We made it." Sometimes Daniel visited, bringing food and supplies, always smiling when he saw them together. "She saved my life once," he'd tell Harold, "but I think she's saving yours now." And Harold would simply nod because he knew it was true. Maya hadn't just survived, she had given him something to live for again. That evening, as the sun dipped behind the pines, Harold tossed a stick across the yard. Maya chased it eagerly, her limp almost gone. The puppies joined in, tumbling over each other in a blur of energy and joy. Harold leaned against the doorframe, his heart full. "You were never lost," he murmured, watching her return with the stick in her mouth. "You were just finding your way home." The last light of day touched the cabin in gold, and for the first time in years, Harold felt at peace. Because sometimes miracles don't arrive in grand gestures. They arrive at your doorstep on a cold night, with tired eyes and a wagging tail, asking only for kindness, and giving everything in return.